Please welcome your panelists for the International Business of Sports, moderated by ESPN SportsCenter correspondent Shelley Smith.
All right, are we starting?
I think we're starting.
So this is a pretty amazing group of people up here, and if you count my salary, probably it's worth, $50, $60 billion, because my salary puts it up. That's a joke. All right. I want to introduce our panelists, who we're very lucky to have today, give up their time to come and be with us. We have down there on the very end, I'm sorry you're on the very end, because he's the owner of the Sacramento Kings. He made news weeks ago when there were protests outside of the arena because of the killing of, I can't find the name right now. Stephen Clark. Young man who was shot in his grandmother's backyard, and there were protests. And Vivek Ranadivé not only calmed the public down, he calmed the entire country down. And he had a gracious speech to everybody, and it was memorable. It was really memorable. He is the owner of the Sacramento Kings now, but he got into the business because he was listening on his transistor radio as a child in Bombay, where he grew up, and he heard the moon landing. He heard the words, "One step for man, one giant leap for mankind." And he said, "I want to do that." And I've learned in talking to him the last hour that when he wants to do something, he does it.
Thank you.
So there we are. Todd Boehly is next to me. He is the CEO of Eldridge Industries, and he's a part owner of the Dodgers, and he's lamenting their performance so far this year. But he said, well, we were down 10 the last couple of years. We just have to wait till we get down 10 again, and we'll start up. And we talked about Corey Seager and his Tommy John surgery. And so we're going to try to find something happier to talk about now. And then this is Chris Park, and he works for Major League Baseball, and he's heavily involved in development internationally. And he talks about how much he loves the baseball in Mexico and in Asia and the Dominican Republic and Brazil. And one of the things you said was, though, anytime you're developing international teams means that you don't have any home. You're always the road team. So I guess that's a peril of the business. But
can be good.
Yeah, can be good. Because I don't know if anyone's seen international baseball, but it's really, really fun, and they do it differently than we do in America. And then down here, on the very end, is Dan Beckerman, who's the president and CEO of AEG. He and his company, sorry, I was going to give you all the credit, but has built LA Live. They own Staples is now 18 years old. That's hard for me to believe that Staples is 18 years old. Yeah, and all of LA Live. They have StubHub Center, Kings practice facility, a chunk of the Lakers, hotels, theater, and they're still looking to find things. Aren't you tired?
No.
No, okay.
Always room to grow.
Well, that's pretty much what it says here. So this is our panel, pretty impressive group, and we'll take questions from the audience as soon as I get through my little litany here too. But let me start with you, Vivek. How do you think, and you're a tech guy, but how do you think the business of sports is morphing because of technology?
Yeah, when I came into the NBA, Shelley, I had this vision. I referred to it as NBA 3.0. And it was really driven by three vectors: by technology, by globalization, and by using sport as a platform for good. So we've been called the most advanced, technologically advanced sports team in any sport. So it started actually with the arena. So when I bought the team, I had to give a personal guarantee that we would have an arena built by 2017, and if we didn't, then they could take the team back. And so we hadn't sold any tickets at that point. And what we did is we used virtual reality. Oculus Rift had just come out, and we created a experience for our fans. So they could put the glasses on, they could walk through the arena, they could pick out their seat, they could see the view. And we were selling tickets even before we started construction of the building. Now we've also taken this to the arena itself. So it's the most wired arena that's ever been built. It's 100% solar powered, so it's all renewable energy. It's also an indoor-outdoor arena, so you push a button and the doors go up, and we've got fantastic weather in Sacramento, Adam Silver actually lets us play our games, many of our games, with the doors open. But at the end of the day, it's all about the fan experience and removing friction, because you can stay at home and you can sit on your couch and see the game on a high-def TV set. So you have to make it frictionless for the fan, and whether it's traffic, how do you get there, where do you park, how do you walk in. So when I walk in the arena, I don't even have to pull my phone out. It just looks at my face, recognizes me, and I walk right in. Your phone becomes the remote for the arena, just as you have a remote at home on the couch. And you can do everything with that remote, including adjust the temperature, if it's too hot, if it's too cold. And we flipped the whole notion of, rather than, because really the concept of an arena is thousands of years old. They had coliseums thousands of years ago. And not much had changed since the days of the Colosseum. And so we wanted to rethink the whole concept of the arena. And in our mind, the arena has become kind of the global communal fireplace. It's become the cathedral. We used to build cathedrals in the past, and now we build arenas. And rather than you checking into the arena, we wanted the arena to check into you. So anyway, I invite all of you to come see this. You know, we're very proud of the building. We have great fans in Sacramento, and we're very excited about the future.
Yeah, I haven't seen it since it's been finished, but I look forward to it. Todd, Dodger Stadium is the favorite in Los Angeles, but it's old. What have you guys done with technology to try to attract more fans? And
well, when we first took over the team, we put about $150 million into the stadium. So we pulled all the seats out, we dug down underneath, and we completely redid the clubhouse, the locker rooms. We also started an accelerator. So we have our own Dodger accelerator, because we really have an environment where 4 million people will come and go. So there's lots of opportunity to interact. So we now have, 12 or 15 different little investments that we've made out of our accelerator, which are all designed to get the fan experience higher. So one of the things you're finding now is that we'll let you choose what goods you want to buy. So, at the merchandise stands, you can pick what you'd like, and what we're finding is that when we give you that freedom, you're more likely to invest more in our products. So, it's a whole spectrum of, incremental ideas around technology, but really all around the fan and the fan engagement. And then also, one of the good, bad things about baseball, good, bad things, it's one perspective is good. You have time to communicate. You have time between pitches. So we're also trying to figure out how do we really take advantage of that time. So, a lot of that hopefully will be resolved perhaps when New Jersey case comes out and there's more opportunity to take advantage of that time and really engage, with all types of sports betting and gambling in the environment.
Right.
That would be a great way to spend that time.
yeah, I love gambling and those kinds of things. How did advancing to the World Series, and so we're not going to talk about Game 7, but how did the advancing to the World Series affect merchandise sales? And
Oh, it was awesome.
I couldn't get through the line.
I mean, there was winning is good. Winning
Winning is good.
more-
Everybody write that down.
So I think we were north of $20 or $25 million of excess merchandise sales than we budgeted for.
Wow.
Because we got to the World Series.
Right. Well, I think you should do it again.
That would be great.
Chris, how has baseball and internationally, how has technology affected what international teams are doing that you've seen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in some ways, really looking back to what Todd and Vivek were saying, technology on its own, I think, enables us to, in some ways, reimagine the way that our brands, our players, our sports connect with communities. And international development has always definitionally been about that, because it is literally reaching out very often to people and to communities who have no real or no kind of heritage of a relationship with your sport. And so we see actually the best opportunities for us are when we're able to meld those two together. So there's sort of the garden variety versions of that, where as we go out into media business development now, we're encountering entirely new players beyond the traditional television networks, which used to be the only ones that had that kind of reach, to the editorial side, where, for instance, in our current Facebook Watch integrations of our weekly live games, we're actually drawing inspiration in some respects from some of the content presentation that we've seen actually in some of our international partners, for instance, streaming that we've done in China. And then we're also able to see the ways in which technology is a kind of O2O conduit, in a sense, internationally. Maybe one good example for us is last year we did a celebrity home run derby off of the main stage at the British Summertime Music Festival in Hyde Park in July. And this was our first foray into really trying to meld culture with baseball in a critically important market that the NBA and the NFL know really well, but where we are a bit of a newbie. And we were really pleased with the results, but a lot of it was technologically driven. So for instance, we supplemented it with a VR integration at a food festival nearby using a game experience that we developed in-house. We also streamed the derby itself to a live audience on Twitter of about over 1 million people, most of which, much to our surprise, was actually outside of the United States. So we're playing with concepts that you could do without a lot of technological savvy, but where with the right kind of integration with new products, we're able to see entirely new results that we think are generally really encouraging.
Yeah, that's impressive. Dan, you are like, your company is the king of technology, from everything you develop downtown. What's next? What do you see next for LA Live? What do you see next for AEG? You have ventures in London and Germany and soccer teams all over the world, but how do you make all that work?
Well, it's funny you mentioned British Summertime is actually one of our AEG festivals,
That's right.
along with Coachella and Stagecoach and Jazz Fest. And you make that point of aligning with something that's experiential, and that really is what drives us in our business model, is something that's experiential. And I know the topic of this panel is international business of sports. When you talk about what's next, we've really taken the LA Live model and we've exported it. And having a sports anchor to these entertainment districts that we're building all over the world is really a critical element. Music is another very important element, along with technology that enables and enhances the live experience. I'm not one that believes that live experiences are at the risk of being overtaken by technology and that VR is going to overtake the live experience. My personal feeling, having gone to a lot of these festivals and been to a number of sporting events at our venues, is that there's nothing that can replicate the live experience. And you see it when you have the greatest moments that you remember when you were growing up in sporting events. It's not watching them on TV, it's being there and having that communal experience with people sharing it with you. But in terms of what's next, if you look at our project in Berlin, which is opening up later this year, another arena-anchored entertainment district, and we have this habit of picking destinations that are in urban locations that are somewhat underdeveloped. So we did it in downtown Los Angeles 20 years ago. We did it in East London about 10, 12 years ago. Now we're doing it in East Berlin, really emerging part of the city, becoming the capital in a lot of ways of Europe. We built an arena there several years ago for our hockey team. And Todd, I can commiserate with you. Our German hockey team just lost in Game 7 last week of the championship, so I'll buy you a drink later and we can cry in it. But we have an arena there, which is a very successful arena, and much like LA Live, we're building the entertainment district around it, and that'll open later this year, and it has a lot of the elements that you see downtown at LA Live, a large music venue and restaurants and bars and cinemas, and residential and hotels, and that's really our model. So I think that is a scalable model for us that we're looking to export all around the world, and incorporating and integrating technology that enhances the live experience is a big priority for us.
I can remember when stadiums didn't have Wi-Fi. That's how old I am. But yeah, one of the things about your company, you said there are 4 critical pillars: sports, music, venues, and real estate. And I guess I was surprised by venues. Why venues are such an important part of AEG?
Well, for us, we have a network. We have, if you look at clubs and theaters and arenas and stadiums, we have about 185 venues all over the world. And it really creates a network that when you plug it all in together and you have the music promotions piece of it and you have sports content that you can tour and you have sponsorship, which is kind of the 5th pillar and probably in a lot of ways the most important pillar. And we have a sponsorship division that only services, we often win agency, our global partnership group wins agency of the year, even though we don't have a single third-party client. It's all our in-house business, and they still do almost $600 million a year with a sponsorship. But having that network, I think, is really what differentiates us and gives us a bit of a competitive advantage when it comes to programming and sponsorship and routing tours and doing our musical events. but the venues is really the critical piece of it. And we think of ourselves as a sports and entertainment company, but the little secret is we're actually a real estate company. And it could be a small club, it could be the El Rey over here on Wilshire, or it could be 800 acres in the desert at Coachella, or it could be just Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles. But real estate is really the core of our company, and it's the content, sports and music, that feeds it, that makes the model work.
Todd, we talked about money, but how has revenue changed in what teams are looking at to achieve or gain revenue?
Well, I mean, from a revenue point of view, there's only a handful of sources, but what we're really focused on is how do we start to make our fans our subscribers? So how do we start to think about them?
To the website or to?
Just subscribers to everything.
Everything
active,
Dodgers.
right? So what we're really trying to do is become a loyalty business that services a subscriber. And then as we start to really understand who our subscribers are, we can start to offer them more and more stuff. So really, I think we're spending our time right now. We really have three sources of revenue, right? We've got the media, we've got the tickets, and we've got sponsorship.
Right.
So, you know, and merchandise and tickets. So you have game day, you have sponsorship, and you have media. So, you know, the media rights, you know, for the teams went up dramatically. We're not going to expect to see that again. So now what we have to do is to figure out how do we transition it to start making our fans subscribers. And if you look at what Netflix is worth, you can start to figure out what a subscriber might be worth.
Right.
So, you know, we see it as a big opportunity to really get, and Man U's now doing it with Man U TV. So Man U TV, if you look at their public filings, is now showing up as a line item. So I think they're going to start to spend a lot more time on that, and it's something that, you know, obviously the rights are tricky, so you have to work through all the rights, and each league has different rights and different opportunities, but every league wants the teams to be very popular. So I think we're all aligned in the end.
Vivek, how does that relate to your team and your business?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what Todd and Dan was saying. When I first came into the league, I'd partnered with Joe Lacob to buy the Warriors, and at that time we paid $450 million for the team, and then I bought the Kings for $540, and people thought that was crazy, and I said to the NBA, I said, no, I think that's a steal, because, you know, in 20 years, will I still be using my iPhone? I don't know, but will I still be watching NBA basketball? For sure. So this is content that people want time shift, they'll watch it as it's happening. It's got a guaranteed market. In the case of basketball, it's a growing market. And really the value is, it's more than the 18,000 tickets you might sell. And so when I look at it, I think of it as a social network, really. He called it subscribers. And it's, you know, how do you capture and how do you expand and how do you engage those people? And we're using technology to do that. We created a product called the Psychological Router, where you can actually route the right kinds of information and the right kinds of offers at the right time, depending. We use deep machine learning software to make those kinds of connections. And then, of course, you know, we've invested a lot in real estate. And when I came to Sacramento, it was one of the worst real estate markets in the country, and now it's become one of the best. And we put about $1 billion into the city, but then it sparked another $1 billion in activity around the city, and it's created thousands of jobs. So I'm very bullish on sports, and I'm very bullish on basketball. And most businesses, their biggest challenge is how do you keep people engaged? And that's something that we do. So I completely agree with what Chris and Todd and Dan have been saying.
Vivek, by the way, learned basketball because he got roped into coaching his daughter's middle school team. And that's where you got bit by the bug, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it was credit your daughter, who's now a singer here in LA.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why he owns a basketball team. So, here we go. Dan, revenues for you guys have never been a problem, it seems. Is that because of real estate? But
hey, Shelley, can I just say something
yeah.
about that? Because I don't think people know that I grew up in Bombay.
Yeah.
So I played cricket. And when I coached a team, I never actually touched a basketball.
You had never touched a basketball?
Yeah, and now I'm sitting on the competition committee with Michael Jordan.
That scares me.
like America is great.
I know.
Is that unbelievable or what? Only in America.
I know, only in America. That it actually does kind of scare me.
Yeah. Don't say that to anyone.
Right.
You're not with the press or anything like that. You're not with ESPN. Or
I don't have to do what?
you're not like working for ESPN or anything. Right?
Not today.
Okay.
I want to talk about soccer, Dan. When soccer was failing in the U.S. and you guys owned 6 of the 10 teams, is that right?
That's right.
And a lot of companies would have thrown in the towel and said, forget it. But you guys didn't. You dug in and you put more money into it. Why was that?
It's a good question. You could call it stubborn, persistent, patient. But our
love of soccer? Did you love soccer?
That's part of it too.
Okay.
But first and foremost, I think it was a business opportunity, and our owner, Mr. Anschutz, I think, really saw the upside long term in the play, as opposed to some of the more mature sports. People were asking him, why aren't you investing in football or in baseball where there's real value? Why are you investing so much money in soccer in this country where it is a distant fifth at best in terms of the major leagues in the country? But I think there was a real belief that with the strategy and with investment and with the commitment to soccer-specific stadiums and with the commitment to improving the quality of the game, bringing some of the best players in the world to the United States to play in Major League Soccer. It's the biggest sport in the world. Why shouldn't it be bigger than it is or bigger than it was in the United States? So yes, it's somewhat embarrassing that at one point there were 12 teams. They contracted down to 10, and due to some financial problems, we owned 6 of them at the time. Happily today, we own just one team, the LA Galaxy, and the league is thriving with on our way to 28 teams with, I would say, the strongest ownership group in any league. If you look around that Board of Governor table, these are some of the most respected and accomplished owners anywhere, and you see investments coming in by the hundreds of millions, and you see some of the best players, you see the quality of play improving, and I think it finally has realized a lot of the potential that we thought that it had. There's still a long way to go. There's still growth opportunity there, so we're continuing to reinvest with our young players, with international players, and in growing the quality of the league and continuing to see it grow at the trajectory it's been on.
Zlatan. Explain Zlatan to me. Ibrahimovic, who is a wonder unto himself. I love anything the guy says. I'll read anything about him. How did you get him?
He's incredible.
Yeah.
He really is incredible. This is a journey that started with him several years ago when we started talking to him about coming to play for the LA Galaxy and continuing the great tradition of David Beckham and Landon Donovan and Robbie Keane and Steven Gerrard, and really doing something new and with a player that's very different from any of those in terms of his personality and his prolific scoring. So this was something that intrigued him a while ago. And to his credit, he came to the Galaxy for an enormous discount. Not to get too much into the plumbing of Major League Soccer, but each team is allowed 3 designated players who you can pay as much as you want to. And at the time, we had a slot open for him. This was a couple of years back. And he stayed at Manchester United, had tremendous success on the international stage and on the world stage. And so we committed the rest of our roster. We have 3 designated players, and he said, all right, I'm ready. I want to come now. And we said, well, we don't have a slot for you. The most we can pay you is, kind of the normal league maximum. And he says, it's not about the money. I want to play for the Galaxy. I want to play in Los Angeles. So just however much money you have, just pay me that, and I want to come. And he did it. And I'll tell you, he arrived on the scene with a bang. With the first game that he played, came down. We were down 3-0, came on, scored probably the most unbelievable wonder goal that I've ever seen. Scored 2 goals and won the game in stoppage time, and it's I've never seen anything like it. And he's really an incredible person with what he wants to accomplish, and he's great for the city and he's great for the league.
He's tremendous. I don't know for those of you who don't know, one of the very first things he did was took out a full-page ad in the LA Times, and in really small print said, "Dear Los Angeles, you're welcome." And I'm like, all right, that guy's mine now.
Well, after he scored the goal, he said they were calling for Zlatan, and I gave them Zlatan.
Yes.
Chris, international players have been a big part of baseball in America. How much more do you see? I mean, in LA really is the king of finding international players. You think of Yasiel Puig, my favorite player right now. You think of that market to tap into. Where else do you see international players coming? Maybe not just to LA, but to the U.S. to play.
Yeah, it's a great question. In some respects, it's probably superficially the operative question for international development. Probably not just for our league, but for all sports leagues, because obviously when you have a local superstar who can actually compete at what's considered to be the top level, that is probably the single greatest asset you could have to drive audiences. And so we're seeing that right now in a really burgeoning sense also out in here in LA with Shohei Ohtani, who is in a sense the illustration of a lot of the dynamics we've been talking about, because he may well be a generational talent. We'll wait and see and keep our fingers crossed. But then in another sense, he's also just the latest chapter of now arguably maybe 3 generations of Japanese stars coming through and coming up to the major leagues and succeeding, but succeeding in a different way, and all along the way writing a different kind of narrative about what those players are. And I think it speaks to what Vivek was talking about, for instance, before, in the same sense that domestically that you can guarantee you can guarantee the brand recognition of the Dodgers, the Kings, and the really great franchises in America. That's not really always going to be the case in a lot of other markets outside the U.S., just as it's not always the case, let's say, with the incoming brands of individual great players, and in our case, for instance, the Japanese league coming to the U.S. So I think the critical point, and it's really the key pillar of Commissioner Manfred's commitment to international development all along, is that with respect to players, with respect to business, we are laser focused on revenue, but it's over a really long time horizon. So every time, for instance, we do modeling about how to prioritize markets, the results that we come up with internally don't make sense to us until or unless we model in 20, 30-year development, because the markets where we really want to develop those transformational talents, which are generally speaking the large standard emerging markets that everyone talks about and investment banker decks are full of, those require a long time horizon, I think, to develop, at least in those cases where we don't have a native heritage of our sport, which, at least for baseball, is true probably more often than it is not.
So what's the next step for Major League Baseball? Do we start playing games where?
So we're in the middle, actually, this year of ramping up our own international play plan. This is really a symptom of the commissioner's commitment here. So, after this conference, I'm off to Mexico to see our first Mexico series in quite a while, represented by the Dodgers, who may well be the most popular franchise down there.
Are you going?
That will,
No.
Starting next year, we're going to actually double then the number of international series that we play compared to this year, and we're in the middle of what's likely the most ambitious stretch of international series, at least for us, that we've seen, and it's in a lot of ways, I think, probably a variant of the same model that the NFL, the NBA, and certainly global football have already well established. And our hope, of course, is that we can synchronize our player development investments with the considerable investments on our business side in terms of business development, so that we'll be able to see returns across the board.
With the NBA, we've talked a lot. There's been games already played overseas. Vivek, what else do you see happening maybe in the next year? China?
Well, China is already there. So
it is there.
China
This year?
300 million people that already play basketball in China.
I know, but will we see a league there or a team there?
Yeah, I think that there will be more of that happening. But we're very excited also about India, because that's kind of the country of my origin. And we're hoping in the near future to announce that we're going to have the first game ever played first preseason game ever played in India. So, and we've also looked at opening. I talked to the people there about having something I call Monsoon Madness, having a league there that was kind of in the off season. And so basketball is the fastest growing sport in a lot of these countries right now. And I think David Stern and now Adam Silver and the NBA have done a great job they've always had that vision that they want to make it international, and as Chris said, it's a long-term commitment, and the NBA does a lot of good in these places. And so when I went and took my team to China, and then when I went to India with Adam, a lot of the time was spent in migrant schools and helping kids in communities with not just with basketball courts and basketballs, but also with education, with computers, with different programs to enhance their lives. So it's really a long-term commitment, and I think that basketball. Now, these guys are all going to get mad at me, but I think of their sports as legacy sports, and I think of basketball and e-games as kind of the future. So
you're going to be an E-team?
yeah, so we have the NBA 2K now.
Yeah, and you have a team?
Yeah, so there's 17 teams, and we think that's going to be huge as well. If you look at the numbers, basically 1/3 the human population plays video games, and so just about everyone plays video games, and NBA 2K is the #1 sports video game out there, and we just launched under the auspices of the NBA, we just launched the 2K League that we're super excited about, and the
we're
numbers.
covering it. ESPN is covering it as an actual league, like the NBA or the NFL. It's
yeah, and if you look at the numbers in terms of these video, how many people are watching this? It's passing up ice hockey. It's passing up, football, American football, and the viewership is unbelievable. So, and at the NBA, we're also learning a lot from these guys. And so, the way they have multiple screens and they provide interactivity, and you're able to monitor signals on the players. So, there's a lot that we can learn from e-gaming as well.
Todd, does baseball have anything like that, like e-gaming or any kind of virtual reality type stuff?
No, I mean, we were very early on into DraftKings,
baseball, right?
Yeah. So DraftKings, MLB was one of the first to invest in DraftKings and get behind DraftKings. But no, there's no such thing like that. But
it would be hard to do in baseball, wouldn't it? Though I don't know.
Chris would know better than I would.
Yeah, well, I think it speaks to there's really two interesting phenomena going on that I think Vivek was describing, which is on one hand this enormous groundswell of support and a really generational tide of popularity of competitive video game playing potentially as a spectator sport, and then at the same time the phenomenal brands of the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NHL. The really fascinating question, which I think will play out with the 2K League and others, for instance, is when you marry the two. So for instance, if you look at where the sports titles, let's say, are situated in the leaderboard of video games generally, it's actually relatively far down, and so it'll be interesting to see how we marry those two things. Certainly, for us at the league level, we do develop our own mobile games, we do develop our own AR, VR experiences, and we're thinking carefully about what might be the optimal way for us to dip a toe into that water, partly after observing how, whether it's the 2K League or the Madden leagues or even the NHL's new forays go. But I think maybe the most critical point is what I think Vivek ended with, which is that at the end of the day, what's most interesting is how to learn from why those esports titles and those tournaments are doing so well. Yes, on one hand, it is video games as a separate phenomenon, but on the other hand, there's a lot of basic blocking and tackling that they are just doing much better than anything we've ever seen when it comes to the development of communities, the presentation of content, particularly on customized platforms, and then also just the interaction of talent with other players, with then full-time spectators as each of the compositions of each of those segments changes over time.
And also the demographic. They have a young demographic.
Yeah. And baseball does not have a younger demographic?
Well, I think some of the other sports have older demographics. I think basketball is still young.
Still young.
But e-games is like an amazing demographic.
Where does the NFL fit in here? I mean, we've heard people say the NFL is on its way out, and basketball is the place to invest. Dan, what do you think? You don't have to bash the NFL.
I'm not gonna comment.
I was just kidding.
I'll let others do that. But we're big believers in esports also, and you see it with eMLS. I was at a board meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they talked about, I think they had 7 million viewers, which, on Twitch. So it opens up other distribution channels, which I think is fascinating when you look at the disruption that's happening with sports content rights. And our belief in the underlying value of the content is still there. How it gets distributed, I think, is somewhat fluid right now. And I'm glad that our local rights aren't up for renegotiation right now, because it's a little choppy out there. But I do see long-term there being new distribution partners that we're going to tap into. But in terms of where the leagues are, I think the smart leagues are learning from esports and capturing that elusive millennial audience the way esports has. So I think that there's a lot of, as you said, there are a lot of lessons to be learned there. But I'm still a believer. I think, Vivek, I think you said in 20 years, you don't know if you use your phone, you'll still be watching NBA. I still believe in 20 years we'll be watching hockey and baseball and basketball and football.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe
I mean,
maybe in a
different way.
in a
I
different
agree.
way, but
I was
Same
just
way.
being,
Hmm?
I was just trying to
He was
be
being
Charles
saucy.
Barkley or something.
We'll never be without our phones.
Yeah.
It won't happen.
Yeah.
Dan, what do you think the best investment opportunities are in the future of sports? If you had, oh wait,
Well-
you have $1 billion. Where would you put your money now?
we're continuing to reinvest in our model of these experience-based entertainment districts. Now they're going to look a little bit different, and I wish I could say that there are 25 great ideas out there for $2 billion entertainment districts all over the world. I still think that there are a lot of them out there, but one of the things that we're looking at is scaling our model in a slightly different way and making it more accessible to different markets. I wish I could say that LA Live worked in Des Moines, Iowa, and I can bash Des Moines. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, so I can bash Des Moines, Iowa.
Why wouldn't it work in Des Moines, Iowa?
I just
Good
don't know.
sports fan.
I don't know if we could spend $2 billion in building a district in Des Moines, Iowa, and have it be successful. But we're seeing in different types and different versions of our model that are still entertainment-based experiential districts that we're doing in new markets. So we have a project that we're embarking on in Nashville, which we're very excited about, right downtown near the arena, but anchored by a large music venue, surrounded by complementary uses,
That makes
hotels,
sense,
cinema,
yeah.
restaurants, an emerging, very strong market, but not one that we would invest $2 billion in, but still make a substantial investment of hundreds of millions of dollars. And we're watching that closely because I think that there are a lot of other opportunities where maybe there are 50 opportunities to do that type of entertainment district. And we're looking internationally. I think there are some big bets that we could make internationally throughout Europe and in Asia in particular. There are a number of markets in Asia. We have, you talked about the NBA in China. We have the Mercedes-Benz Arena in Shanghai where we have NBA games every year. Mm-hmm. And I think when we look around Asia more broadly, there are a lot of opportunities there, a real desire for content, a desire for state-of-the-art facilities, these entertainment destinations, and in a lot of cases our own Western talent. Right now we have, I think, Ed Sheeran and Katy Perry were recently touring throughout Asia, and I think that there's a real, if we can open up that market and make it economically viable for them to have in Australia, New Zealand, and throughout Asia to have a 25-city tour, we'll see more Western artists, certainly our own Western artists touring there. So I think we're really looking at Asia to scale our model on a grander scale.
Why has sports become such an international thing? For years it was an American, we were here, our teams were here, and now it has exploded. Why do you guys think that has happened? Dan?
Well, I look at we were talking about Ibrahimovic just a few minutes ago, and I look at the international appeal of our players and really breaking down the walls, enabling people around the world to consume our product.
I know. Why do they like it now, though? Why didn't they like it 20 years ago?
I don't know if it was available to them.
Distribution systems have changed dramatically.
I agree.
So
with
the
that.
cost,
Yeah.
the cost to get them has gone way down, right? Fox used to have to pay for their nodes before they even bought content. Now you just plug in and you have distribution. So moving stuff around is
And they
around
see
the
it,
world.
and they like it. And
And then they get
want it.
engaged with it.
Vivek, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there are, first of all, there were sports like soccer, which was a global sport,
Right.
and it had global appeal. I think basketball has got that same kind of global appeal, and what basketball has done a good job of is it represents almost a vibe, almost a lifestyle, and it's managed to have that be adopted across the world. And so I think that sports, the role of sports has changed dramatically in all ways. It's changed. When I first became an entrepreneur, my first customer was Goldman Sachs, and everybody then wanted a bank or Goldman Sachs as a first early adopter. And now it's sports teams, it's celebrities, it's athletes. So I think the worlds of sports and media and technology and globalization have all come together. But I also wanted to say that, it is obviously a huge privilege to own a sports team, but it's also a responsibility. So to the extent that we want the arena to become kind of the cathedral of the future or the global communal fireplace, that also means that we have a responsibility to do good in the community. And that's something I think that David Stern and then Adam Silver have always been very committed to, and I think that sports has a role to play in that, and we saw that in Sacramento recently.
Yeah, and Dan, I think you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, and when you think about the international exposure and look up and down the roster of teams these days, there are a lot more international players and interest in our leagues. You look in hockey, it's not just Americans and Canadians anymore. There are Eastern Europeans, there are Russians, there are a very diverse rosters. Same thing in baseball, and certainly in basketball, I think probably leads the way of having international appeal up and down the roster. You had talked about Ibrahimovic, 15 years ago, there would never be an international audience for a Major League Soccer game. And we have a clip up on the Galaxy website now about that goal, that 40-yard strike that Ibrahimovic had a couple of weeks ago. And it's called The Goal Heard Around the World. And we show the goal, and we show it broadcast, how it was broadcast by all of the countries. There's probably, 15 different international countries who were broadcasting that game. And you hear the call of that goal in 15 different languages. And that wouldn't have happened 15 years ago.
I recently met Zaza Pachulia, who plays for the Warriors, and he said he's not so popular here. He has kind of a bad reputation, but he is beloved in Georgia. And he says if you watch and you read Facebook from Georgia, it's off the charts. So that told me that has really changed too, even though he's not playing right now, but we hope he does because we like him. All right, I'd like to open this up to questions right here. And we have a microphone over here.
I believe.
I thought we did. We have a microphone? Hello?
It's coming.
We go.
Oh, right here. Sorry. I'm sorry. I thought it was her. Okay. Right here. He has a question.
So more for you guys over here. The couple of things that are happening, like Kroenke spending $4 billion on this new stadium here in LA, and I was just in Berlin and saw the activity in East Berlin and kind of the younger people being there. For when you look at Korea and Japan, the baseball stadiums there, and China, and you look at their venues, do you see a big change happening in the future in what they're going to build and building these state-of-art, just like you did in Sacramento, state-of-the-art arenas and kind of complexes? What do you see happening in the future there?
Yeah, I see. We had a group out from Bangkok last week to tour our facilities at LA Live. We took them to Coachella, and I think they saw what a venue could be, and I think that they do have older venues, and I think that the desire to invest in venues is there's a real appetite for it, and I think they're embracing. People always ask, well, when you come over with your sort of Western style and content, is that off-putting? I'd say a couple of things. First of all, we always want to partner, and the first thing we do is we assess the market and we partner with someone locally because we want to understand and not just export our way to them. And it really becomes a partnership and it becomes collaborative because every culture and how they want to consume entertainment is a little bit different, and every arena design or stadium design that we do is going to embrace how they like to entertain, what kind of offerings they like, what kind of food they like, and so it really needs to be local. But I think that in general we see them embracing improved technology, enhanced venues, great customer experience, great amenities.
And then I think ideally the way in which those communities in the places you mentioned, like Japan and Korea, make their own stamp on their experience then inspires, I think, some of the work that Dan and the AEG would do. So I think Korea is a fascinating example because there probably isn't another community nationally, at least in the world, that is as technologically savvy, at least when it comes to consumer media, and yet the KBO stadiums leave a lot to be desired, frankly. And but that doesn't stop those fan bases from creating really distinctive experiences in the stadium of game-long chanting and singing, notwithstanding how long a baseball game can be and how much downtime there is. We're trying to learn from that as a content producer or rights holder on one end of things so that we can provide more for Dan and the AEGs and the great venue makers to work with.
Question right here, behind you. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Harry Keeley. I'm with the State Teachers Pension Fund here in Sacramento, in California, in Sacramento. I want to address an issue that raised a question that Todd alluded to briefly in his first comments, and that is the New Jersey case. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when gaming comes out of the shadows and into the sunlight of day. I'd like to know how the panelists think about how gaming will change the fan engagement, the types of revenues that will be generated, and how those revenues will be shared between ownership and players.
Yeah, so in our case, we are huge believers that this is going to be a massive opportunity for us. And our commissioner believes that as well, and he's been kind of leading the charge. But in Sacramento, we actually have found ways to allow people to start betting using loyalty points. And so it's a way to keep people engaged and not, and I've actually spoken to our governor about, leading the way on this. So this is without question the future, and we are going to bet on it in a big way. And we've already got hooks in our platform so that when it is legal. But in the meanwhile, we're going to let you use loyalty points and get experiential rewards and benefits. So again, it's just a matter of when it happens, and I think it'll happen in the next few years.
Todd?
As it relates to how
Brought it
we'll
up.
share
You
with
have
players, I think the players, I think, are, I doubt there will be a sharing mechanism per se, but they'll probably get paid more. And, I think the content, we see it all as inventory, and the more our inventory gets used, the better it is for us. So we're really focused on how do we lead the charge in that, which is also why we got into Daly's fantasy so early. But we think it's just another great revenue model, and frankly, we think it's a lot safer way to have legalized betting, because a lot of the abnormalities in betting will be surfaced. So we're pretty excited about the opportunity.
Question here in the middle.
Hi, thanks. We've heard a lot about immersive engagement, experiential. So I'm curious, when you think about the fan experience, when you sit around the table with people in your team, what do you think about for the fan, and what kind of parameters are you looking at?
You want to go?
Yeah, so again, going back to an earlier comment, this is something we can learn from e-gaming and how interactive they've made the experience. And when we think about the fan, it's not just the 18,000 folks in the arena, but it's sitting at home on your couch or walking through an airport with your phone. And so we were the first team to start actually broadcasting our games in VR. And we did that in India, we did that in China. And I wanted fans to have the same experience that you have when you're sitting in my floor seats. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We're going to see more interactivity. We're going to see you'll be able to pick what views you look at, what camera angles. Maybe you'll be able to pick who you want doing the play-by-play, and you could have guest commentators. So just a lot of choice, a lot of interactivity, a lot of data, multiple screens, and fans just want to be engaged. And then, there's the whole gaming aspect where, is he going to make this free throw, or, is he, what's going to happen next? And so we think that there's a lot of room for continuing to leverage technology to, just to give fans even more.
Question back here. That's what we do in my house, is sit around and make bets on who's going to make that free throw or not.
Question for Vivek and maybe the rest on how do you see technology education and investment education for player development as a tool to attract players, and is that something that might even be part of contracts in the future?
Yeah, when I first came to the league, and I went to summer league, and we had just gotten our draft pick was a young man out of Kansas, and I took everyone out to dinner that night, and we were sitting at this dinner table, and it was a fancy restaurant, and everybody was ordering their dishes, and this kid, he had never been to a fancy restaurant, so all he knew on the menu was mashed potatoes, so he just ordered mashed potatoes for dinner. And then later on, he signed his contract, and he had all these people around him, and they were all basically just trying to suck off him. And so what I realized was that while we put a lot of focus into their basketball skills, we weren't really putting any focus into developing them as people, as human beings. And so we launched something called Kings Academy, where we're trying to give players, by option, if it's their option, skills in these various areas. I actually took my players through Silicon Valley. I took them to the Tesla factory. And so I think there's a lot of room for that. They have a huge appetite for that. They all have great savvy in terms of social networking and so on. And they're all intensely interested in technology, and they actually want to invest in tech companies. So I see kind of a marriage of sports and tech.
We have time for a few more. Run here. See who can get there the fastest. Let's have a contest.
It's a race.
Thank you. Yes, question is, have you guys analyzed the long-term social impacts of e-gaming, or do we have the data, or is it too difficult to come to any conclusions?
Yeah, it's still early, and there's obviously there's a lot of criticism, there's negatives, but there's also positives, and I think that the education system can actually learn a lot from e-gaming. So how are these games able to keep kids that engaged and that focused? And what can we learn from that to apply to education? I have a friend, and she's got a kid who's autistic, and he has a difficult time learning in the regular classroom, but he's got a voracious appetite for e-gaming. So I think we need to kind of look at all of that, and both the plus and the minus. In the case of our e-gaming team we just launched, we've worked hard to just give them other skills and other outlets beyond their normal gaming. So I think that's a great thing to be thinking about.
Anybody else? Here in the, I'm sorry, I should have called on you.
Yeah, thank you. Chris Gorgon from the Man Group. I wanted to get your thoughts on any of the other kind of pastimes that seem to have become popular lately that revolve around sports, such as Top Golf. Seems to be popular when people go to different cities. Like, I have friends, when they go to Vegas, they don't want to play golf in Vegas anymore, but they want to go to Top Golf. Or the spin places where they play table tennis, or where there's bowling outings. I just want to get your thoughts on those types of kind of sport hybrids.
Sure. Well, I'm building a 450,000 square foot athletic facility outside of Washington, D.C. called St. James. And we're opening it in December. It's really basically modeled after Chelsea Piers in Stamford, Connecticut, which I get to spend a lot of time in. I have 12-year-old, 14-year-old, and 16-year-old. So seeing how ineffective that was designed, because it was an old Clairol Procter & Gamble distribution facility. The hockey facilities aren't even regular size. The environment is not a great environment, but the demand is insatiable. So the amount of activity that goes through those places, it's millions of kids a year. So if we started to put 30 of them together, and right now what we're seeing is a lot of demand from folks like Simon and General Growth, who all of a sudden have massive amounts of real estate with very little basis in it, and they have to figure out, how do we repurpose it? So I think we're seeing lots of these conversations where they're very happy to give us very long-term leases at very compelling prices in order to drive the activity levels and get the malls engaged again. So I think we're seeing more and more of that, and I think as you see, the devices are actually making people long for more of that, because I think there's a whole loneliness component to all the devices. So the more communities that you can build around these types of activities, I think they're great revenue models. And then I think they all become, not only do they become revenue models, but then they become media opportunities, right? Because then you start thinking about the network and the sponsorship and the kids and what you can actually be promoting inside of these environments. When Dodger Stadium now, I think when we took over, we had sponsorship of about $30 million. I think it's now up to 80 million, and a lot of it is really engaged with community. We're building dream fields. We're doing a whole host of things. I think we build a field every month. So, I think a lot of this stuff is really just there's so much demand for it, so we're just going to fulfill the demand.
Plus, you're building the next generation of fans too. And we talked about, are these sports going to continue?
Right.
We're building hockey rinks and soccer fields, and we're seeing the youth participation increasing dramatically. So while it's the right thing to do for a whole host of reasons, it's also good for our business in building the next generation.
Well, and we know if we get a 6-year-old in Dodger Stadium, he's like basically 50% likely to become a huge fan.
Yeah.
So the sooner we can get them in the stadium and give them the experience, the more likely we are to build fans that are really loyal for the long term. So we'll just bust kids in. We have in one-tier games or one-star games, we'll give out the whole back fields just to kids.
It's an awesome thing that you guys do, and a lot of leagues do that, and so I appreciate it. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank you all for being here. It was very interesting. Thanks for coming. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.